Our next artist, David Aughenbaugh. David has been working in computer animation for over 30 years, making cartoons, computer games, television, and film. Now he's using his art and technology skills to create works of his own, which he would like to share with you now. David?
Okay, thank you. I'm David Aughenbaugh. Pleasure to be here. I want to talk to you today about some images I've been creating. This series is called Worlds Within Worlds, and hopefully that name will make sense once you see some of it. By way of background, I'm a professional in the visual effects industry. I've been a compositor on a couple dozen feature films. I'll touch on a couple of the more interesting ones. In 2016, I worked on a virtual reality animated short called Pearl, directed by Patrick Osborne, which was nominated for an Oscar, and it was the first VR film to be nominated, which is kind of cool. Then in 2019, I was compositor on a film called First Man, starring Ryan Gosling. That film won the Oscar for visual effects, and I was on the visual effects team, so that's pretty cool. I didn't get to wear a tuxedo and get a trophy. Only the team leaders get to do that. But my girlfriend bought me a nice trophy at the flea market. I worked at DreamWorks for a couple of years, DreamWorks Animation. I was in the lighting department. Mostly worked on the film Megamind. Also in production while I was there was Puss in Boots, Madagascar 3, and the fourth Shrek movie. In my spare time, I'm a photographer, mostly nature and natural phenomena. My father and I are both lightning photographers. I've been going out in the desert with him since I was a baby. This image was taken in southern Arizona on many trips with my father. I'm also a musician and a certified clinical hypnotherapist. I'll let that sink in for a second. And I make digital paintings. This is a detail from one called Bolo's Hideaway. It's currently on display at a winery up in Healdsburg called Thumbprint. A few images up in there. But mostly what I want to talk to you today is about my work as an artist and animator on large-scale images. This is an interest that grew out of my work in photography, using a technique of shooting many photos and combining them into one large image, so it can be printed very large. This one was made from 33 source images. This one was made from 138 original images and combined into one very large picture that could be printed. This would be about 20 feet across. That's actually about actual size right there, if it were printed at 300 dpi. There's a lot of detail in that image. So out of that work, I developed a process of creating digital paintings. They're also very large. Here's kind of a sampling of that work. This is a grouping of 9 images. Each one is at least a gigapixel in size. Here's an example of one of those gigapixel-sized images. I've really enjoyed making them, and the response has been very positive. But what I found is that there isn't really a good way for people to interact with it. It's too big. I could print it, 16 to 20 feet across and let people walk up to it. Another idea was to do camera moves on it and show all the cool detail. I gave that a try. Let me see if I can play this. So I came up with something that I'm calling a super zoom. This one starts with video footage shot by a friend of mine named Daniel Zatz, and then transitions into my artwork that's based on that footage. A few seconds in, we transition from video to still image, and then we continue to zoom in. The images that come up were created by zooming in on the glacier footage and then finding interesting artifacts to explore. The color is derived from subtle shades of color present in the original ice footage and bringing that color into full expression. I use a technique called frequency space to work with the color. If you're interested in frequency space, we can talk about that offline. My process does utilize artificial intelligence, but only in the upscaling step, which is a big part of this. Not using any text prompts, and the AI has not been trained on other artists' work. I'm taking advantage of artifacts in the upscaling process to create abstract images. The resulting animation is a continuous zoom in. This one goes on for almost 6 minutes. A continuous, seamless journey deeper and deeper into the image. Deeper and deeper into the image. Remember that part about being a hypnotherapist? It turns out this animation is really good at inducing a trance state. But don't worry, I'm not going to ask you to cluck like a chicken. But I should say, if at any point during the presentation anyone feels inspired to cluck like a chicken, don't hold it in. We as human beings love trance states. We seek out ways to put ourselves into a trance. We have a name for these pursuits. We call them hobbies, or concerts, or dancing, or TikTok, or even just watching clouds, or watching a spider spinning a web. In this case, it would work better if I weren't jabbering over the top of it. I keep re-engaging with your mind when it could be going quiet. So I invite you to come back later and watch the animation on YouTube sometime when you aren't being talked at. Just search for Arctic Super Zoom on YouTube. What happens is that your rational mind is trying to make sense of what you're seeing, and it can't. So it ends up going relatively quiet, and you find yourself in a pleasantly focused state. There's a sense of well-being and clarity. Creativity and inspired problem solving always occur in some version of this state. For example, many people have reported getting their breakthrough ideas while in the shower. While you're watching this, your thinking mind goes somewhat quiet. Your creative mind is quite active, finding all kinds of things in the abstract images passing through. You recognize things, you identify things. You can't help it. It can also be very enjoyable. So I'm just going to let this play for a minute. I'm going to pause it here. Okay. So how's everybody doing? Is that all right? Relaxed, I hope. So that was about quieting your mind. Now I want to engage with your mind a little bit. There was an aspect of that animation that I could actually use some help figuring out, if anyone has the right expertise. The animation is a continuous camera move on a very large image. It's actually made up of 31 still images that all fit inside each other, kind of like nesting dolls. But what if it really was one big image? How big would it be? Well, I tried doing some math. I'm not sure I did it right. But at any rate, each of the 31 images is a TIFF file that's 27,000 pixels across. The original source images were actually about twice that big, but this is the largest I can bring into After Effects and work with it. And as a point of reference, a 4K television is, of course, 4,000 pixels across, so these are large images. So you take that large image, you select the middle 20%, cut it out, and scale it back up to 27,000. Take the middle of that image, cut it out, scale it back up to 27,000. Do that 31 times. Mathematically, I think that could be expressed as 27,000 times 5 to the 31st. And then I ran that equation. I came up with a pretty large number. What is that number? That's how many pixels across the image would have to be to do that 6-minute zoom and not run out of pixels. How big is that image? Let's say I wanted to print it at 300 dpi. So I take the big number, divide it by 300, and that gives us inches. This is the actual number here. Take that, divide it by 12, that gives us feet. Take that, divide it by 5,280, that gives us miles. We still have a very big number, so we divide it by 5.88 trillion to give us light years. We come up with 1.1 million light years. The Milky Way galaxy is about 87,000 light years across, so roughly 12 times the size of the Milky Way galaxy. So if anybody knows a good printer, I have a job I'd like to get a quote on. And of course, if anybody knows how to do this math, I'd love to talk to you. But that's what I've got today. Thank you very much.